أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
Amen.
Yeah.
Okay, Jazakallah. So today the topic is that was St. Paul the founder of Christianity? So obviously Christians will try to assert that Christianity's come out because of Jesus Christ. But what we want to look at today is that really the case? Or was it St. Paul? So I will do a talk and then we'll open it up, inshallah, for question answers and comments and everything, inshallah. Right, so St. Paul. What do we know about St. Paul? So his real name was Saul, and he was from the place Tarsus. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. So you can see on the map there, on the right-hand side next to Antioch, is where he was born. And he was a Jew. He was born a Jew, but he was also a Roman citizen. Of course, in those days, Roman Empire spread all over, and so they all came under the Roman Empire, and he was born as a Roman citizen. And he took the Latin name of Paul or Paulus. We think that maybe he was born between 5 BC to 5 AD. So it was around the same time as Jesus. Of course, there's some controversial about when Jesus was actually born. But anyway, he was around about the same time as Jesus. Also, we know that he persecuted the Jewish followers of Jesus. So this is information obviously coming from the Bible and Christian side. So again, we know that he took an active part in the first martyrdom of Stephen. So Stephen was the first person who was killed, and he was part of that. Again, in Acts, which is generally felt to be written by Luke, who was a follower of Paul. But anyway, Acts is basically talking about that time after the death of Jesus and what happened there. So Paul himself has said, and Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest and desired of him letters to Damascus, to the synagogues, that if he found any on his way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. Now, we've got to bear in mind that at this point, there was no Christianity. So the followers of Jesus at this point were Jews and only Jews. So here, he was getting paid, and if he found any followers of Jesus, so he would then capture them and bring them to Jerusalem and then get paid for that. So we know also that Jesus never even met Jesus. Paul never met Jesus, and so he wasn't a follower of Jesus. As I said, he was paid by the Romans, and his duty was to hunt down the Jewish followers of Jesus. So it seems that he understood the Jewish law. Obviously, he was born a Jew and grew up as a Jew, but he seems to have resented its restrictions. So although he was a Jew, it doesn't seem like he was a practicing Jew. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is that he turned against his own people, the Jews, using their belief in Jesus as an excuse. So again, this is a picture portraying the sort of persecution that was going on at that time. Now, we also know that the followers of Jesus, who were Jews, they knew about Paul and they hated him for this because obviously he was an enemy. He was collecting the Jewish followers, persecuting them and arresting them and so on and so forth. So they knew about him, but they knew also what his job was. So where did it all change? Apparently it changed with the so-called vision of Paul. And this was the thing which he claims that he met Jesus on the way to Damascus. So again, here is a picture portraying that particular vision. Now, the question that I usually ask, and this is one of the main things that we need to understand, that why would a vision of Jesus go to Paul and change everything that Jesus taught? So this is what I normally pose to Christians, that why Paul? Now, as I said, we know that Paul went to Damascus, or on his way to Damascus, suddenly he saw this vision. And this vision told him that you should now go to the Gentiles. The Gentiles are the non-Jews. So as I said, at this point of time, the followers of Jesus was Jewish. And this was Jesus' message. But now he wanted to change that. And instead, he wanted to go to a people who he himself never went to. And he told, don't go to. So as I say, coming back to this question that I pose, why? Why did Jesus, in this vision, go to Paul? Why didn't he go to James, the brother of Jesus, or Peter, who was known as the Rock? These were leaders of the followers. And of course, if he went to the leaders of the followers, they would listen to him. But instead, he goes to an enemy of the followers of Jesus. Now, when we look at the mission of Jesus, what he taught was very clear. Do not go to the Gentiles. Do not go to the non-Jews. Go only to the Jews. This was what Jesus himself was saying. Again, I've only come to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And this is his clear mission, that I've come for the lost sheep. Bearing in mind that Jerusalem at that time had 2 tribes of Jews. The other 10 tribes, there was 12 tribes, the other 10 were scattered all over the Middle East through the 2 exoduses. So he said that I've come for all the sheep, not just those 2 in Jerusalem, but all the sheep of the house of Israel. We've got to understand, and this again is something which I often will try to drum into the people I'm doing Tabligh to, that the Jews believe, and they still believe to this day, that they are this exclusive club. They are the chosen people, and it is only for the Jews. They do not accept conversion. There are some Jews that do accept conversion, but the mainstream Jews do not accept conversion. You have to be born into it to become a Jew. And so they made it very clear. It's the God of Israel, not the God of anybody else, only for Israel. And so this God that they believe in has only come for the Israelites. So this is the Jewish understanding. And we've got to understand this, that this is how Jews, and like I say, even go today to Jews, this is what they believe, that they are having the only God, and it's an exclusive club to only for them. There's a joke that sometimes when they go to heaven, there will be this sort of partition area, and the person will ask who's behind the partition. They'll say it's the Jews, that they believe that they're the only ones that's going to heaven. Now, as I said, Paul and Jesus were both Jews. They knew very well that this is how the Jews look at things, that we are the chosen people. We don't care about anybody else. They can charge interest to other people. They don't care because they're not Jews. They don't count. The only people that count, according to Jews, are Jews themselves. Now, suddenly, after Jesus' supposed death, Jesus appears before Paul, a person who, as I said, is persecuting his followers. And he tells only him that actually I've changed my mind. I know that while I was alive, I was telling everybody just to go to the Jews, but now I've decided that let's go to the Gentiles instead. So this, like I say, is a dramatic turnabout. And yet he entrusted Paul, an enemy, for this. And this is, like I say, this is what I'm trying to get through. This is what I drum through to the people, that they need to understand this point. So as I said, this is a major direction. And if it's true, then this should have happened whilst Jesus was amongst them. Why didn't Jesus go to the Gentiles while he was still supposedly living? Instead, apparently, once he has died, then a vision of him comes and suddenly appears and says, go to the Gentile. So we have to now analyze this vision. As I said, it all centers around this vision of Paul. Now, this vision has been recorded 3 times in the books of Acts. But when you compare them, you see there's major differences, especially when it comes to witnesses. Now, again, I often say to Christians, like Jehovah's Witnesses, and we, of course, would do the Shahadat, the witnesses. Having witnesses is very, very important. It's Islamic teaching, because they can support you, they can back you up. So what happened with this vision? Did he have the witnesses? If there were other people who saw this vision, then they could have supported Paul, whatever he said. But it seems that every time Paul relates this vision, he changed the facts. Now, how is that possible? Obviously, if you witness something, then don't matter how many times you say that thing, you know it. You've witnessed it. You'll be able to repeat the facts. But, and this is very important, if it's made up, then yes, you could change the facts every time you relate it. So this is what I'm questioning now. Did this vision really happen? So please look at this. It's in the book of Acts, chapter 9, 22 and 26. So look it up yourselves. Now, concerning the witnesses, Paul said, suddenly there shined around him a light from heaven, and the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. So alhamdulillah, here he's got people who heard the voice of Jesus. They could support him. They may not have seen the vision, but they heard the voice. And that makes it very, very solid. Until he then repeats it again in Acts 22. And this time he says, and they that were with me saw indeed the light, and they were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spoke to me. So previously he was saying that they heard the voice. Suddenly they're not witnesses at all. They see a light, but they don't hear the voice. So they don't know what Jesus has said. In Acts 26, again, he mentions about the light and the witnesses, but only speaks again about him hearing the voice. So again, he hasn't got that support of witnesses. And once you haven't got witnesses, then it's your word against everyone else's. So it's a shame witnesses were unable to back him up. But it's very concerning that Paul first says that he did hear the voice, but then later on he says that actually I didn't hear the voice. Now the light is mentioned in all 3 passages, but again he differs. It shines about him in Acts 9 and 22, but then it shines about me and them, which journeyed with me in Acts 26. So which one was it? Why is he changing it? The same with the reaction. First of all, he says that he fell. Again, in Acts 22, I fell. So it's all about him falling to the ground. But then in Acts 26, he says that we all have fallen to the earth. So which one was it? Why is he changing? And then the message, and this is very, very important. Then the message that Jesus gave to him also changes. First, Jesus told Paul to go into the city, and it will be told to thee what thou must do. Similarly, he says the same thing in Acts 22. That he's told, arise and go into Damascus, the city, and there you will be told of all things which are appointed to thee to do. But then suddenly, he changes again. And now Jesus tells him directly, For the Gentiles, until now I send thee. So Jesus is telling him there and then, you now go to the Gentiles. So which was it? Was he told by Jesus there and then? Or did he go to Damascus and then he was told by someone? Or did Jesus appear again in Damascus and informed him to go to the Gentiles? Which one is it? Why is this story constantly changing? So I will claim it's a lie. But again, how can we prove this? Is it just what I think? But when we look at Paul again, he's saying the same thing that Paul has said, for though I would desire to glory, I shall not be a fool. For I will say the truth, but now I forbear, lest any man should think of me above that which he sees me to be, or that he heard of me. 2 Corinthians 12:6. For I will say the truth. Alhamdulillah. And then he says, now I will forbear. I will forbear to tell the truth. I will not tell the truth. I am forbearing. What kind of man is this? This is a person that we've got to believe that this vision was true. And yet he's openly admitting that he will forbear telling the truth. Paul again says, being crafty, I caught you with guile. Being crafty, I caught you with guile. Guile means that you use trickery and things like this. Being crafty, I caught you with that craftiness. This is Paul. This is the person we're meant to believe saw this vision. And again, for if the truth of God has more abound through my lie until his glory, why yet am I also judged as a sinner? My lie. So he's openly admitting that to get more people, to get the people convinced, he's willing to lie. He doesn't mind lying. This is the person that we're talking about. Paul has said again, and unto the Jews I became a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that under law, as under law, I might gain that which are under law. I become a Jew to gain the Jews. I become a Christian to gain the Christians. I become whoever you like to gain you. This is the sort of character we're talking about. That he doesn't mind lying. He doesn't mind using trickery. He doesn't mind doing anything to gain the people. That's his intention, to gain the people. So, go to the Gentiles. With this permission that Jesus gave Paul in this vision, Paul then tries to convince the disciples that they should also go and preach to the Gentiles. Now, as I said, these disciples were Jews, and these disciples of Jesus, and knew very clearly that Jesus said, do not go to the Gentile, only go to the Jews. This was his message. Now, did they believe Paul's vision? Did they believe it or not? They knew who Paul was. They knew he was an enemy. Did they believe in Paul? They didn't. They would have none of it. And this, again, is very important. So, after trying to convince them that, yes, you go to the Gentiles, and he couldn't convince them. So when they opposed themselves and blasphemed, he shook his raiment, he shook his clothes and said unto them, I am clear, for henceforth I will go unto the Gentiles. So it shows that they did not believe him, and he decides that I am going to go to the Gentiles. So again, did the disciples, the followers, the true followers of Jesus, did they accept this? And when James and Cephas, I don't know if that's pronounced right, and John, who seemed to be the pillars, perceived the grace that was given to me, they gave to me and Barnabas the right hands of fellowship, that we should go unto the heathen, the Gentiles, and they will go to the circumcised, the Jews. Now, does this make sense? If they truly believed that the vision was true, that Jesus had changed his message, then they should also have gone to the Gentiles. But they say, you go to the Gentiles, we will continue to the circumcised, the Jews. And so it shows that they just want to get rid of him. Do what you want. We're going to continue what we want. They haven't accepted that message. Yes, no doubt, some of them did accept later on. But from here, we can see that they were not happy with this at all. But now, finally, Paul had won the right that he could go to preach to the Gentiles. But as it shows, still the disciples were not convinced and continued to preach to the Jews only. But we've got to bear in mind that the Jews had already rejected Jesus. They had put Jesus on the cross. As far as the Jews were concerned, Jesus was false. He died on the cross. He went into hell. And so, likewise, they continued to reject the followers of Jesus. Why should they accept him? They've proved Jesus to be false. So you can bear this in mind, that the Jews, the followers of Jesus, are trying now to go to those people, the Jews, who has rejected Jesus, who has tried to kill Jesus. Of course, they're not going to have much success. At that time, the Jews had decided enough was enough with the Roman Empire. They revolted against the Romans. It came to a head in, I think it was 70 AD, where there was a massacre. Many, many Jews died. But they were trying, this is what they wanted from Jesus. They wanted him actually to lead them against the Romans, and he refused. So that continued. So the Jews were now having a war as such with the Romans. The disciples, being Jews, were caught up in that. So first thing, they're trying to spread the message with people who don't want to hear it. And secondly, there's this war going on anyway. So obviously, it was very, very difficult for the followers of Jesus, the Jewish followers, to spread the message. Whereas on the other hand, Paul now goes to the Gentiles, the non-Jews. And to make it easier for them to accept, he abolishes the law of God and replaces that. All you need to do is believe in Jesus and you'll be saved. You don't have to follow the 10 Commandments. Just have faith in Jesus. That's all you have to do and you'll be saved. What an easy message. So, of course, Paul's message was very successful. He was gaining more and more people. Well, as I said, the Jews themselves, they were struggling. They couldn't hardly get any converts. So, did Paul abolish the law of God? Again, this is something which sometimes we find that Christians reject and say, no, we follow the 10 Commandments. But if you actually analyze it, they pick and choose. Why aren't they circumcised? Why are they eating pork? Why do they drink so much? So are they really following the law of God? Paul said, and you've got to bear in mind, Paul wrote many letters. Half of the New Testament is Paul's writings. So this 1 Corinthians is one of his letters that he wrote. Romans is another letter. Acts is all about Paul and so on and so forth. Paul said, wherefore I give you to understand that no man speaking by the Spirit of God called Jesus accursed, and that no man can say that Jesus is the Lord but by the Holy Ghost. But then he says, Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone that hangeth on the tree. Now, again, we've got to understand that the problem Paul had, on one hand, he's saying just have faith in Jesus. But on the other hand, Jesus apparently went to hell. He died on the cross. He went to hell. Why should the people accept a person who's gone to hell? So Paul he's a great spin doctor. He made this wonderful thing. He said, well, actually, yes, Jesus went into hell, but he did it to take the curse of the law away from us. He took the sins of man on him. And so we're sinless. And this is how he justified that Jesus going into hell. So as it says here, that Jesus has redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. For it's written, cursed is everyone that hangeth on the tree. So this is how he justifies that Jesus went into hell, but he took the sins of man upon him, and he was the Savior. And now all we do is believe in Jesus. So again, Paul, as I said, Romans, therefore, he tries to justify this. Therefore, by the deeds of the law, there shall no flesh be justified in his sight. For by the law is a knowledge of sin. So basically he's saying that if you know the law and you go against that, then obviously you've committed sin. But if you don't know the law, then it's fine. Then you don't commit sin. We conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. So here he's now pushing this idea that all you need to do is have faith. You don't have to follow the law. And if you just have faith, you will be saved. So this is how he's trying to move away from the law. As I said earlier, he didn't like the law. He found it very restrictive. And this has helped him now to even abolish the law. So what did Jesus say? Jesus was very clear. Think not that I have come to destroy the law or the prophets. I have not come to destroy, but to fulfill. So this is Jesus' message, that he's come to fulfill the law. Yes, he's brought a new understanding of forgiveness, but that's not new law. That's just a new understanding of it. But he hasn't destroyed any law. He was strictly following the law. Again, he says, Jesus says, and it's easier for heaven and earth to pass than 1/10 of the law to fail. So again, making it very, very clear that this law is important to follow. And this is what Jesus pushed all the time, to follow the law. Again, he criticized the leaders, the Jewish leaders, that the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. All therefore, whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do. But do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. So listen to what they say, fine, because what they're saying is good, but they themselves are not practicing it. And so this is one of the criticisms that Jesus had on the Jewish leaders and why they turned against him. So the disciples rejected this concept. Again, this is important to understand that the disciples, I'm talking about the Jewish disciples, not the followers of Paul. So Paul said, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ. Even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. So again, he's building up this case that you don't have to follow the law. Just having faith in Jesus is enough. So very clear message from Paul. James, the brother of Jesus, he said, and I say he's a Jewish follower, he's a brother. What does it profit, my brethren, though a man say he had faith and have not works? Can faith save him? He then goes on, and I love this bit, I haven't got it written here. If a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, notwithstanding you give them not those things which are needful to the body, what doth it profit? So here he sees a lovely example of if a person hasn't got any clothes, he's starving, and he comes to you for clothes and food, and you just depart and say, it's okay, you just had faith. How's that going to benefit him? The person's still going to starve to death. So he continues, even so, faith, if it have not works, is dead, being alone. For as a body without spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. So here it's very clear that James, the brother of Jesus, is saying that you need to do the works as well. Yes, by all means, you need faith. But the faith has to go hand in hand with the works. It can't go without the works. So to me, that's a clear denial of this. Okay, so now we come to the contradictions between Jesus and Paul. That is Paul really following Jesus, or is he presenting his own teachings? So the first one is the Godhead. Jesus, of course, was a Jew. All Jews believe in Tawhid, the oneness of God. So he said first of all commandments, the very first of all commandments is, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God." Throughout his mission, he always preached about the one God. He denied him being a God. Yes, he used the term Son of God, but not to mean that he was literally a son of God. It's just that he was a beloved of God. So this is Paul's message. Jesus' message. Whereas Paul, who, as I said, he was also a Jew, he also believed in the one God. But then he started to teach that Jesus is also the Son of God, the God. And he emphasized also about the Holy Spirit. So this, although he did not bring about a Trinity, that came much later, but his teachings brought about the concept of Trinity. So as Paul says, concerning the flesh of Christ came, who is over all, God blessed forever. Amen. So here he's saying that God became flesh, and that's who I say that he became the Son of God, because he was the actual God in flesh. Again, Paul said, who being in the form of God, lo it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and made in the likeness of man. So again, emphasizing how God became a man, how became Jesus, God. And so he's introduced this idea that Jesus is a God. Again, Paul says, looking for that blessed hope and the glorious appearing of the great God and our Savior, Jesus Christ. So again, emphasizing that Jesus was God. They're all part, although not the Trinity that hadn't come yet, but still this concept of Son of God being the literal Son of God, being God himself. So, as I said, this brings about later on the Trinity, which of course was the belief of the early church. And of course, the Bible eventually mentions about the Trinity, but again, this is something for you to understand. There's only one verse about the Trinity. For there are three that bear witness in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost. These three are one. Now, this basically, the understanding was that this was a footnote. I say footnote, but a side note, if you like, something in the margin, which somehow crept into the Bible when it got written. So it wasn't there in the beginning. And Christians themselves admit this now. And so now they've removed this verse from the Bible. So, the Gentiles. As I said before, Jesus made it very clear. Do not go into the way of Gentiles. Very, very clear. Whereas we've already mentioned that Paul himself said that henceforth I will go to the Gentiles. So clear change in the direction. Jesus saying, don't go. Paul saying, go. Sins. Jesus said, Jesus asked about a blind man, that why was he blind? Was it because he was born, sin had come in, and that's how he became blind? So Jesus answered, neither has this man sinned, nor his parents, but the works of God should be made manifest in him. Always bear in mind that Jews are basically the same message as Muslims. We don't believe that sin can be transmitted, nor do the Jews. They don't believe that you can transmit sin from your parents or anything like this. It is you yourself that does sin. So here Jesus made it very clear that this blind man, he didn't get sin because it came to him from parents or anything like that. It was just Allah, that natural cause that he became blind, whatever reason that was. Whereas Paul, he said, in whom Jesus we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins. So again, here he's saying that, again, the original sin there, that you're born sinful, and that you can find redemption through Jesus, just believing in Jesus, and you can be saved. So, of course, we will say, no, you have to pray to God and ask for God's forgiveness. But, of course, Paul put about this message that, no, Jesus is the one. And that's why the church these days, they pray to Jesus for the forgiveness of sin and not Allah. Resurrection. Again, we know all about this. But still, Jesus said, behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for as a spirit have not flesh and bone as you see I have. So here Jesus met the disciples afterwards. The doubting Thomas approached doubting Thomas and proved that he was still alive. And then went sat down with them, ate food and stuff like that. So we believe that Jesus survived the cross, he did not die. Whereas, again, this is something which I often quote, Paul said, if the Christ be not risen from the dead, then all our preaching vain, and your faith also in vain. That everything of the church centers around Jesus dying on the cross. If that did not happen, then there's no teachings, atonement, resurrection, all these teachings, salvation, everything that they have, it's all based on Jesus supposedly dying on the cross. This is why we always go to Christians and try to prove that Jesus did not die on the cross, because then it really wipes out Christianity. The law, we've already mentioned. Jesus again said, think not that I have come to destroy the law. I have not come to destroy, but to fulfill. Whereas Paul said, therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. Now this is important to understand, because once you leave the law, you pick and choose which bit of law you want, then it can result in you basically doing whatever you want. Hence we see today's society. So the law talks about crucifixion. It's a very important thing. As it says, this is going back now to the Old Testament. This is my covenant which ye shall keep between me and you and the seed after thee, that every man child among you shall be circumcised. So Abraham was told this, that everyone has to be circumcised. And we also know, of course, that Jesus himself, being a Jew, got circumcised. Again, the Old Testament stresses, and this is also a very important thing, that the uncircumcised man child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from my people. He has broken my covenant. So if you do not get circumcised, you're not part of the covenant. This was a very clear message, and that's why Jews got circumcised. That's why Muslims also got circumcised, coming from Abraham, who circumcised both Ishmael and Isaac. And so from Ishmael came the Muslims and the Jews. Very important circumcision. It is a covenant with God. But once in the law, then you don't have to get circumcised. Paul says, behold, I, Paul, say unto you, that if ye be circumcised, God shall profit you nothing. You don't have to be circumcised. Paul is saying, apparently he knows best. Understanding that Paul was a Jew, he himself was circumcised. He also got Timothy circumcised to please the Jews. He knew that the Jewish followers of Jesus would not accept Timothy because he was not circumcised. He was a Gentile. And so he got him circumcised. He knew the importance. But if you start saying to the Gentiles, you have to get circumcised, people are going to be very reluctant. So Paul wanted to remove this reluctancy. No need to get circumcised. Forget about the covenant of God. There he says the new covenant is with Jesus and his blood. Again, the Jewish law, very clear that swine is unclean to you, as it is with Muslims. You should not drink strong wine. Yes, you can drink a little bit, but not become drunk and so on and so forth. Even Paul admits that drunkards shall not inherit the kingdom of God. But once you pick and choose, you can do whatever you like. Hence you see today's society that they eat all sorts of pork, they drink all sorts of alcohol. Oh, that's it. Right, so that's basically the presentation I wanted to present today. So now we open up for everybody if they've got comments or anything they want to ask, or it's up to you. The ball's in now, your court. I don't know how we're doing for time. Yeah.
I think we've still got about 15 minutes or so,
Right.
as in time. If anyone has any questions, please, you're able to unmute yourself. You can ask your questions, or you could also, the chat option, send via there as well, please.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, Islam.
I just wanted this, have you got it on YouTube? It was fantastic. Jazakumullah khair jazak.
Jazakallah. So no question, just
It was wonderful. Jazakallah.
Okay, right, okay. Now this time I'm going to put my picture on because I know someone's before, and now I've got a new computer so you can see my face. Right, so anybody got any comments, or anybody when they're doing the talk, how they present, Paul. I see Bilal's there. Maybe he can give you a bit more about the history. He knows a lot about Christianity. Is there anybody got anything they would like to say? As I keep saying, this is a discussion group, so it's for your benefit. So please do speak up. You can ask a question through chat line if you like. Yes, please.
Just a quick comment, maybe, if you could talk about the end of Paul and how he actually kind of got arrested and put in jail, because it seems as though even though he's corrupted Jesus's message, it appears that it was actually very successful in terms of modern day Christianity. Everyone's actually accepting it, even though now it's kind of declining, but it did actually reach a peak. And we know obviously people who claim prophethood will obviously ultimately get cut by Allah, as it were. But it seems on the face of it that it was quite a successful innovation in the Christian faith or the Jewish faith.
Right. Well, I mean, first of all, obviously, we have to understand that Paul never claimed to be a prophet. They make him a saint, Saint Paul, but he never claimed to be a prophet. And actually, through his efforts, yes, he went far and wide and he spread Christianity amongst the Gentiles. But he was also persecuted, and I think maybe Bilal can help me here. He was killed through that persecution. So, yeah, his end wasn't very good. But obviously he was very successful, and because of his works, naturally Christianity spread. But you've got to bear in mind at that time the Christians were being persecuted by the Romans. We see quite often about how they were facing the lions and things like this. And it was only 300 years later when Constantine accepted. And apparently he, in a vision, saw a cross and took the Christianity and won that battle. He was fighting to unite the Roman Empire. There were 4 empires at that time. And eventually he became the only emperor. And he was the one that made law, the Christianity and also the Trinity. Although he himself obviously projected himself as a god, he basically said that if you don't accept this, you have faced my wrath, so you're going to be punished. So he was the one that eventually made Christianity the religion of Rome. Why? Again, I think it's because it was so easy to follow. If you look at, well, Islam wasn't around at that time, but Judaism, there were so many laws and restrictions and things like that, whereas this was quite an easy religion to follow. Maybe that's why he accepted Christianity. I don't know. But that obviously was 300 years later. With Paul himself, of course, we know that he was traveling around and he was very successful. But as I said, the Jews or the Christians were being persecuted.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's a question on the chat line. Why did Jesus, alayhi salam, drink wine? I'm sure that's wine, not vine, even in small quantity. Yeah, the Jews are allowed to drink. And obviously with Islam, Allah said enough is enough because you can't keep to a small amounts. But whilst they did drink a little bit, obviously Jesus and anybody knows that if you get drunk, you lose your senses. So it wasn't encouraged. But yes, Jesus drank wine. We see at the wedding, he turned water into wine, in fact. So the Jews, to this day, they do drink wine. Wine has only been forbidden to Muslims. Otherwise, anybody else can do it. But it's a danger that even in this country now, if you drive after one glass of wine, you can be over the limit and you can lose your license. So now well, everybody knows the effect of wine, but it's only Islam which has actually forbidden it. The next one is, just as some teachings of Islam are altered according to fiqh, maybe John also did that. What are the chances in that happening? Okay, well, first of all, no teachings of Islam has been altered according to fiqh. Fiqh is an understanding of the law. So different fiqh schools would explain the Islamic law. But alhamdulillah, Allah's protected the Holy Quran, and the law found in the Holy Quran is the same when it's in the time of the Holy Prophet as it is now. Yes, some Muslims will have different interpretations, bring in hadith and things like that, but the law still remains the same. Maybe John also did that. You mean Paul, maybe? What's the chances of that happening? I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to say there, but obviously, Paul, I say, he knew the Jewish law. He didn't like the Jewish law. It was too restricted for him. So therefore, this was a way, I think, of trying to please God, but try your own way. Of course, the fact of the matter is that it's got to be God that changes the law, not man. So this was Paul's idea being presented using the authority of Jesus. But as I said earlier, if this was really something which Jesus believed in, then Jesus should have been the one to have changed the law or introduced different things or gone to the Gentiles, not Paul. So this is why we think that, you know, it's Paul that's created just Christianity using the figurehead of Jesus as authority, but following mainly Paul's teachings. Okay, we've got another question. What is this? As Hazrat Muhammad never met with Hazrat Awais Rani, who is the same way, is it possible for John to have never met Jesus or still be a follower? Some parts of Sunnah, like keeping your trousers above ankles, marriage to non-Muslim girls, like these teachings. I'm not really understanding what you're trying to say here. Maybe it'd be better if you actually spoke. The thing is, as I said, that Paul never met Jesus. He only claimed to see Jesus in a vision, but he's using Jesus to present his ideas. And no doubt, Paul was a very great orator. It's very hard to understand what Paul says sometimes. And maybe he convinced himself that what he's saying is true. I don't know. But, I mean, the thing is that Paul was not a prophet. He hasn't got a duty to change the law. Only a law-bearing prophet can change the law. Now, some parts of Sunnah, like keeping your trousers above the ankles, a marriage to non-Muslim girls. I don't know really what you're trying to say here, but Islam, whilst it allows the people of the book to marry, you can marry the people of the book. The Christians are not really the people of the book. The fact of the matter is, as we said, that Christianity believes in shirk, that Jesus is a God. And when you look at marry the people of the book, it also says you can eat the food of the people of the book, whereas Christian food is pork. So we can't marry Christian girls. You can marry Jews because they also, but it's better to marry a believer. As for the trousers above your ankles, yes, some Malvis, they assert that the trousers should be above your ankles. The Holy Prophet basically said, do not allow your clothes to drag on the floor. And that was because it showed proudness. Even though Abu Bakr said, well, look, sometimes my cloth drags on the floor, the Holy Prophet Muhammad said, no, you don't do it. Your intention is not for proudness. This is for those people that are showing off. Like these days, you know, some of the youngsters, for some reason, they love to have their trousers coming down so they can show their underpants. So a similar sort of thing. So the Gerdandi, sometimes they go to the extreme of saying that you're keeping your trousers above your ankles. But that's the real reason. Same with keeping no moustache. What the Holy Prophet said was that keep the moustache trimmed so that the food does not get into the moustache, but they've taken it to the extreme. And so they removed the moustache completely. So that's their understanding, but that's not law, and that hasn't changed any law. Right. What is the reason for Jesus circumcised? Jesus was a Jew. All Jews, when they're born at the age of 8 days, they need to get circumcised. Now, as I said earlier, Abraham was told by Allah that this is the covenant between the believer and him, that all the male children have to be circumcised. Now, coming to the Holy Quran, does it say anywhere in the Holy Quran that we need to be circumcised? No. So why are we circumcised? And it's because of Ishmael, the son of Abraham, that as he was circumcised, so the Arabs used to get circumcised. And with the Holy Prophet Muhammad, he didn't change anything until Allah told him. So he followed the previous law. So he followed this custom of being circumcised. God never told him to stop, and that's why you are circumcised today. It's coming through there. So Jesus, obviously, like all the Jews and all the Muslims, they are circumcised at a very young age, and it's part of this covenant. But the Christians do not get circumcised, so they're not part of this covenant. They cut themselves off. And again, this is something you need to try to get through to them. That, they say that there's new covenants. I don't know if you go to church, they drink wine and they have bread. So the wine is meant to be the blood of God, and the bread is meant to be the flesh of God. And it's this new covenant that they say that now having this faith in God, having the faith in Jesus is enough. So that started this new covenant. But that is not, as I said, what Jesus taught. That's been introduced by Paul and the churches as it went on later on. Okay.
Rabbi sir?
Jiha, yes.
This is Toby here.
Yes, I recognize your voice.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Rabbi Saab, just to confirm, may Allah bless you, and also just to confirm that we have participants from United States, we have participants from Nani Ahmadi brothers and sisters as well online, and we have participants, believe, from South Africa. There's a question which has been sent on the WhatsApp. I think it's from the Muslim brother. He says, Jesus did not die on the cross. He went to the sky. What is your scholar point of view? And another question I think is from the Christian, I'm not so sure. He says, why Christians say Jesus died on the cross and he took the sins? So it's about 3 questions, but I think the first one is from a Muslim brother, and another one I think is from a Christian brother or sister. Thank you very much.
I mean, that's a big subject. So I think we may have covered it before, but obviously the concept is that Muslims believe that Jesus went physically up to heaven. But the Holy Quran does not support this view. The Holy Prophet Muhammad does not support this view, and nor the companions of the time, the Holy Prophet, support this view. This is something which crept into Islam. And perhaps when they met Christians and heard about Jesus being alive in heaven, so someone introduced this idea that Jesus did this. Now, basically, the concept is that Muslims can't believe that Jesus died on the cross because the Jews put Jesus on the cross to prove that he is false, that anyone who dies on the tree, on the cross, goes into hell. No Muslim will ever believe that Jesus went into hell. But what happened? So, of course, the Holy Quran states that the Jews, they tried to kill Jesus, but they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but they made to appear like one crucified. We say that Jesus did go on the cross, but he did not die on the cross. He went into a swoon, so he appeared like he died, but he did not actually die. And then he survived and went on to continue his message, going to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Other Muslims, over the years, they come up with, what does it mean by appear to have died? And so this concept have come in that actually Jesus was not put on the cross. Instead, someone else, maybe Judas, someone else, was made to appear like Jesus. That person went on the cross, Jesus was saved, and he was taken up into heaven. But what we've got to understand is, what does this mean? First of all, it means that an innocent person, even if it's Judas, he was innocent of the crime that they were trying to do with Jesus. An innocent person, apparently God sends this innocent person to hell. Is God just or unjust? There's no way God is going to send an innocent person to hell. The second thing is that Allah deceived the Jews into believing that this is Jesus. The Jews to this day believe that they killed Jesus because everyone saw Jesus or someone that looks like Jesus die on the cross. So will Allah deceive people? Is this possible? It doesn't make any sense. So Allah is not about deception. So this is not the correct understanding. This is a concept that has crept into Islam. But as I said, if you read the Holy Quran, it is very clear that Jesus is dead. He's not physically alive in heaven. And no one can come out of heaven. This is again very clear from the teachings of Islam. Now, I mentioned about the companions of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. They knew perfectly well that Jesus was not alive in heaven. And one of the best ways of understanding this was when actually Jesus himself, when actually the Holy Prophet Muhammad passed away. At that time, Hazrat Umar was thinking that Jesus, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, he is not dead. Instead, he has just gone up to heaven like Moses went up to see Allah for 40 days. He has gone up to heaven and then he will come back down again. So he was going around with a sword in his hand saying, if anyone dares say that Holy Prophet's dead, I will kill you. Hazrat Abu Bakr was not there when he came. He heard what was happening. He went straight in, met the Holy Prophet, kissed the dead body on the forehead and said, I will not let you die twice. He then came out and recited a portion of the Holy Quran that Muhammad is a messenger of Allah. All messengers have passed away before him. If he dies or killed, will you turn on your heels? This was actually revealed at the time of the Battle of Uhud, when the rumor went around that the Holy Prophet had died. Some people left. And so Allah said, is this it? Do you follow Allah or you follow the Holy Prophet? That if the Holy Prophet dies, that's it, end of story, end of your faith? Or are you believing in Allah? So if he's died, will you turn on your heels? When the Holy Prophet, when Abu Bakr recited this verse, everyone, including Hazrat Umar, everyone realized that the Holy Prophet was dead. And it says that Umar went into a swoon. Why? If the Muslims believed that Jesus was alive in heaven, why didn't Umar or anybody else say this? Say that, no, you're wrong. Allah's wrong. Why is Allah saying that the Holy Prophet can die? Jesus is alive in heaven, the Holy Prophet can be alive in heaven. The fact that no one mentioned this shows that this was not a belief at the time of the Holy Prophet, that Jesus was alive in heaven. It came in later. So it's a long thing, and by all means, we can discuss this later on, or you can send me an email. If you go to my website, www.ymd.org, then all that quotations is found there. Right, the second thing, sorry, Toby, I forgot. What was the second thing about sin or something? Toby?
Yes, Anikon?
What was the question you saying?
Yes, the other question was that if Jesus took the sins, which sins did he take?
Right, okay. We believe that sin cannot be transferred. And I say this, Jesus, as I quoted, also believes that sin cannot be transferred. No Jew believes that sin can be transferred. You can't die for someone else's sins. You can't born and your mother's sinful and that sin comes to you. You can't pass sin over to someone else. Everyone is answerable for their own sins. You can't bear the burden of anyone else. You can't carry someone else's cross as such. So Jesus, we believe, like all prophets of Allah, was sinless. He did not commit any sins, and he certainly did not take the sins of man upon him. Now, where this concept which has come into Christianity, which is not a teaching of Jesus, but as I said with Paul, that sin can be transferred, the original sin and all things like that. How has it benefited man? How has it benefited any Christian that you just go to the church, you see the priest, and he says, say 3 Hail Marys and you're sinless. This is not the case. People then go out and commit other sins. The idea of what's being redemption or Toba, as we say, is that not only should you ask Allah for forgiveness of sins, but you should have the intention of not doing it again. It shouldn't be lip service that I'm saying, please forgive me, but I'm going to carry on doing the same sins over and over again. This is not what Allah wants. Allah wants you to change, to you to become pure and repent properly. So that means that you understand the sin you've done and you've changed it. That means that you do not do it again. Not that someone else can take your sin from you. So this concept that Jesus died for the sins of man, there's no foundation at all. It's not what Jesus taught, and we don't believe it. We can't accept this at all. It's not found in Islamic teachings. It's not found in Jewish teachings. It is only from Paul's teachings. Okay, we've gone past 8, so I think that's the time up, is it? Or is there any other questions anybody wants to ask?
Rabbi, we've got a few questions on the chat. There's 2 questions there. If you've got a few time, it's up to you if you've got time, if you can answer them.
Okay. Paul is one of Jesus' companions, Hawari. As I said, Jesus never met Paul, only in a vision, apparently. And I've already explained that vision is very questionable. So Paul, as I said before, he was persecuting the followers of Jesus. He never met Jesus. There's no record at all of him ever meeting Jesus. The only thing is that, like I say, the vision of Paul, which we've gone through, and that's very questionable, that every time Paul related it, he changed it. So what is this? Mark 16:15. Jesus said, go into the world and preach. This also includes Gentiles or not? No. The Jews, as I said, they are exclusive club. So you've got to understand that Jesus taught the Jewish teachings, and the Jews, as far as they're concerned, the world only consisted of Jews. So all these things where Jesus says, go to the world and things like that, it means go and meet Jews around the world and give the message to the Jews only. So this is how they understood it. As I said, the problem is that once the Gentiles came into the picture, they did not understand the Jewish teachings. But Islam and Judaism is very close to each other. We can understand a lot of what the Jews are. You can meet a Jew and ask a Jew. They will tell you this same sort of thing, that they will only spread the message to Jews. And so this is what Jesus was very clearly saying, that yes, go around the world, which he did himself, but only go to the Jews. And this is who Jesus preached to. Now, there were some people who no doubt were in the crowd and they heard Jesus' message. But of course, if you hear someone's message, that's one thing. But Jesus did not directly speak to that people. What Jesus said is that it's not meet for the children's bread to be given to the dogs. The children's bread being the law of Judaism, the dogs being the Gentile, the non-Jews. This is how Jesus saw it, that the Jewish law was not to go outside the Jews. It's not meant for them, it was only meant for the Jews. And like all Jewish prophets, this is what he taught, only to the Jews. Okay, I think that's all the questions there.
Assalamu alaikum, Rabbi Saab.
Yeah.
It's Toby here. I can perhaps, obviously some of our audience now is dropping down so dramatically. We can still ask that those who have questions, they can still write their questions, and we will spare another 20 minutes maybe again for next week as well, so that at least some of the questions are answered. It's important that people can reflect, and they can also send in the question as many as they can. And inshallah, I think we'll be inviting some of other friends of ours in Ahmadi as well, inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay, so let's finish it for today, because I've also got other things to do. And like you say, if you've got any questions, please give it to Zaid or Toby, and by all means, we can cover it next week. Okay, so please join me in silent prayer. Bismillah. I'm sorry. I think. Amen.
Assalamu alaikum, Rabbi Saab, Jazakallah. Just a quick announcement before you say salam to everybody.